Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Just out walking Lulu right now. Say hi, Lulu. Bringing a sort of different video to my channel today. For those curious, this is not my typical kind of YouTube video, and this is definitely not a sign of me trying to take my channel in a different direction. I still intend to do movie-based content and everything for this channel, but this is a video that at the time that I'm filming it, I've been sort of planning out for, I guess you could say, the better part of a year. If I'm playing my cards right, at the time that I'm uploading this, it is Mental Health Day, and I guess you could say it was roughly around the time of Mental Health Day last year that the seed for this video was planted, because mental health has definitely had a major part in my life in the last few years. There have been situations in the last few years that have forced me to have to develop a sense of perspective and appreciation for life as it goes, both with the good and the bad, and being able to be honest with myself about when I was wrong, and just learning to be a more honest and direct person. So I guess you can call this a sort of deep personal dive, if you will, into my journey with mental health. But because I've been planning this out for a year, it's given me time to really reflect on what I actually want to talk about, because I mean, there's definitely some cobwebs I want to get out of the closet and really just be upfront with the whole journey, if you will. Now, why am I filming some of this while walking my dog? Well, as I said, this is a video about mental health, and it's often when I am walking my dog that often I will find myself delving into the deep crevices of my mind, if you will, as far as where my journey of mental health has taken me. And it's really through moments like walking my dog where I've been able to develop that sense of perspective and appreciation for the life lessons I've earned because of my difficulties with mental health. There's been moments throughout my life where I have to reevaluate the good and the bad about myself, because life is not always about what you like about yourself. I've had moments in the last few years that I'm not proud of, but hey, for me to grow as a person, I need to be upfront about those situations. I also want to talk about my healing, because for the better part of 3 years now, I've been on this continuous journey of self-healing, so there's definitely going to be a lot to dive into, but hey, it's given me much earned life lessons that I'm holding near and dear to this day. It is time for me to get those moments out in the open and just clear the air, be upfront about the person I am these days and where those bad situations have taken me. So I hope you'll stick around with me. Let's get the journey started. So where does my real journey with mental health begin? Well, that's difficult to say because there's several facets of it. I definitely think I'm OCD. Not that I've ever been diagnosed with it, but I've definitely been a real perfectionist throughout my life. I know perfectionism doesn't necessarily mean OCD, but nonetheless, I also look at myself as somebody who doesn't always adapt well to change. I've had moments throughout my life where I almost felt maybe perhaps I could be bipolar. Some of the symptoms that I feel I could relate to, I mean, I'm not necessarily doing research on, it's just me being expressive about my feelings and how they come across. Another thing to keep in mind is I also have Asperger's syndrome, which I didn't find out I had till I was in high school, and I actually did go to a psychologist for a time while I was in high school. I stopped going to him around my sophomore year of high school, which for a while I wasn't even sure why, until finally about a year or so ago, just out of curiosity, I asked my mom, and she said my insurance was no longer covering the session, so that's why I had to stop going. Now, in the time since, have I done any sort of pursuing of anything therapy-wise? No, because a lot of the moments that definitely sum up my mental health journey, if you will, I really have just been looking inside myself and just reevaluating those situations to the point where I feel like I'm just kind of seeking the answers within myself. That's sort of been a weird trick I've discovered, at least with my own mental health. You know, sometimes the answers are right inside of you. I know that's not always the case with anybody, and for what it's worth, I would never call myself, you know, a expert on psychiatric help or anything. No, I am not a therapist. I am not a psychiatrist. I am none of that. If you feel you need to go out and pursue therapy or whatever to find the answers you need to bring peace to yourself, please do it. What I do for myself may not necessarily be for you. But in the last like three and a half years now, I've just been on this continuous journey with self-healing. And it's been an ongoing thing because I've had some very bad episodes over the years that have definitely forced me to reevaluate myself, because if I continued on that path, only the powers that be know where I would be right now. Now, what have been some of the more underlying themes throughout my journey with mental health? Well, a lot. I definitely think I've always been sort of a guy who sort of marched to the tune of his own drum. I've never been a trendy kind of guy. I try to get into trends and either it just doesn't last long, or a couple exceptions that even sort of did not click well with my mental health. Like for instance, back in 2020, I tried diving a little more into like politics or whatever, at least in terms of what I was posting on social media, just because I felt that's what I had to do at the time. But that conflicted very heavily with my mental health at the time. And after that 2020 election, I just said after that, I'm not getting into politics anymore. That's it. I'm not saying that I don't care about what's going on in the world right now. I do care, but you know what? I also have to make necessary decisions for myself. If I want to keep myself in check as far as my mental health goes, and I just decided after 2020, no more politics for me. That was it. And I just kind of go my own way since then. But even still, there's even other facets where I've never been like a trendy kind of guy. I'm not the biggest video gamer. I'm not the biggest movie watcher in terms of newer movies. I never really got into like the MCU or whatever. I know a lot of people like that. The only MCU movie I've seen, at least of the ones that have come out in the past decade, is the first Avengers. Even growing up, I wasn't a sports kind of guy. My dad's a big sports lover. He used to play softball and everything, but he put me in t-ball when I was in like first grade, and I just couldn't get into it. I was out there in my own little world, and I know some people could say, well, you were a little kid then, but even if you threw me out in a baseball field now, I'd probably be the same person just because I can't connect with it well. Now, truth be told, I had low blood count as a kid, so because of that, I was not able to participate in physical sports a lot as a kid. But even if that hadn't been the case, I don't think it would have made much of a difference because, you know, I just wasn't a sports kind of kid. My brother was into Pokemon when we were kids, and I got briefly into it because he was into it, but it didn't last long for me. We went and saw the first movie in theaters. I had some cards that I got from my brother, but you know what? It doesn't resonate with me for some reason. And I'm sure for a lot of people, you might notice that with my content. I mean, listen, I'm not saying anybody was asking me to do a video about a Canadian VHS of Frankenstein or whatever, but you know what? That's something I want to do. Even if it just reaches a small audience, that's fine because that's who I want to connect with. I want to connect with the small group of people who say, oh yeah, that interests me too. Those are the topics of movies that interest me. Anybody can come on here and do a full-fledged movie review about their favorite movie. And you know, I've had ideas about doing that, but at the same time, I could sit here all day and talk about Frankenstein, Jaws, Never Ending Story, or RoboCop, the movies themselves. I can talk about that all day, but there's other facets that I just feel like don't get talked about. And that's partly why I've used my YouTube channel as an example to be able to be expressive about those little things that interest me. Even going back to my childhood, I had very eclectic interests even as a kid, and I'm sure down the line it played heavy roles in my mental health and everything because it definitely causes a bit of a divide in terms of the people who I've been trying to connect with over the years, because a lot of the people that I was trying to associate with are more into current things, where it's like I'm more into the older things. And again, that's not things that were just pushed on me, that's just the way I became interested in things. My mom had Frankenstein on VHS. At 4 years old, I wanted to watch that tape. Not because my mom sat me in front of the TV and said, watch this movie. No, I, at 4 years old, wanted to watch this movie because I wanted to watch it. Even doing this mental health video, like nobody's asking me to do a mental health video. Why am I doing a mental health video? Because I want to do a mental health video. There's been so much in my journey with mental health that I don't like talking about, but at the same time, I'm excited to talk about because, you know, let's say I really take this YouTube thing seriously. I don't want past experiences to come creeping in later on, turning me into something that I'm not these days. You know, listen, I was a very different person a few years ago. It was me at my darkest hour. It was me in a very betrayal kind of state of mind. I betrayed some friends. I betrayed myself, and it's just not a version of myself I ever want to have any sort of association with ever again if I expect to have a clean and clear conscience and mental health going forward. So what are some actual specific moments throughout my life that are definite highlights of my mental health? There's a lot. I would say my real journey with mental health probably began when my hormones kicked in. That was roughly around the age of 12. And one thing that I have noticed that has been a recurrence throughout my mental health journey and my emotional journeys, if you will. If I'm physically attracted to somebody, I've noticed that a lot of times when those feelings intensify, a lot of rage brews out of it. And I find myself in these weird stages, not so much recently, but definitely when I was a teenager and definitely in my 20s, that I will build up this rage where I just want to have some type of beef or anger to distill upon this person, even if they didn't do anything wrong. Where does that come from? I don't know. It's just rage. You know, it's going back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe I'm bipolar. I have this side of me that's just has a very strong inferiority complex in regards to other people, that it creates this very big defensive and angry projection, if you will, that is just knee deep in insecurities that I am just not able to deal with. And this happened with many people over the years. You know, I had a crush on a girl when I was in middle school, and the girl I had a crush on in middle school, as well as the girl I had a crush on in high school, one of the things they both had in common was that they were both teachers' pets. Maybe that was just my type at the time. I kind of went for the smarter girls. I don't know. I mean, yes, later on I kind of found myself going for more the attractive types. Like there was these two girls who were seniors when I was a freshman in high school who, yeah, I had a crush on at the time, but I was 14. I thought to myself, they're 18, gonna graduate, they're in relationships, I'm not gonna act on that. Years later, when I'm 18, they're in their early 20s, and I knew they were single, I thought, maybe I'll act on this now. That didn't pan out well later on, and I know a lot of the reason why that didn't pan out later on was because I was just very knee deep in emotional instability at the time. But to go back to the girl I had a crush crushed on in middle school. As far as I know, she still doesn't like me to this day, which I think is stupid because, I mean, this is all stems from a crush I had on her when I was 13. And I've only sporadically seen her over the years. Like, I remember when I was in high school, I tried reconnecting with them on Facebook and they cut me off. Fast forward about 8 years ago when I joined Twitter for the first time, it gave me a list of suggested people. Funny enough, one of the people that popped up was her, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I mean, it's been, what, 10 years now? It should be water under the bridge at this point. Let's just let it go. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't have to talk to this person. I don't have to interact with this person. I thought, just follow them and go about your business. So I did that. Skip maybe 2 weeks later, I just thought, you know what? Let me see what that person's up to, just out of curiosity. I found their profile and it said that they blocked me. And I just thought, really? Because of the damn crush I had on you when I was 13, that just, I've long been past at this point, but whatever. And it's kind of the same with my high school crush as well. I mean, yes, I've crushed on quite a few people from my high school years, but like the person who I really had a crush on at the time, you know, she was an odd one. I mean, she had a very weird sense of humor. I mean, she was the first person I became friends with when I went to high school, because keep in mind, when I went to high school, I pretty much was joining a bunch of new faces. I didn't know any of these people at the time. So the fact that I became friends with like a girl at the time, I didn't really have a lot of close female friends at the time. And we had some nice conversations. I'm not going to say we didn't. I mean, we had some nice phone conversations like very early on in freshman year. But again, just my Asperger's syndrome, my insecurities, I'm developing these feelings, but it's also boiling this rage that just wants to be against this person because I just think it's just not real. This person's a fake. It was not meant to work out later on. To the point that that person and I pretty much don't talk anymore. I do occasionally see them at the store I work at. They shop there, but they never say hi to me. They don't talk to me, and I just keep my distance. And it's fine. I mean, I've been well over her since 2013, 2014. It's been well over a decade. Now, has that rage really been in me recently? Not so much, because at the same time, I haven't really been crushing on anybody lately, but at the same time, I also feel because I've been much more self-conscious of my mental health in the last few years, it's been numbing that down, so to speak. At least I hope it is. In terms of my emotional feelings and everything, you know, I definitely feel like my 30s has been the most controlled period of my life in that regards. I mean, it was definitely not in control when I was a teenager. I was not a very happy teenager. I wasn't very happy in my 20s either. And it's not necessarily to say that like in those times, like I didn't have any reasons to be happy. No, I mean, I've led a pretty happy home life and everything. I mean, listen, do I have a perfect home life? No, who does? I mean, my parents split when I was 2, so I pretty much spent my entire life with them separated. So I know it's not like something that emotionally scarred me like from that or anything. I never grew up thinking, I wish I had different parents. I wish I was richer or something like that. I was always very content with the way I was living my life throughout those years, as I am now. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's definitely changes I need to make in my life now, mostly because I'm not getting any younger. I'm 32. I need to make certain choices both with myself, you know, for my well-being and everything, and for my future ahead. But yeah, keeping my mental health in check is definitely high on that list. Now, one specific aspect I can say about my mental health is every aspect of it has always been purely emotional. I've never been drunk or high on my life, so I know that never played a role in these mental episodes I've had throughout my life. I mean, that's a personal choice for me. I mean, listen, I'm not going to make this a PSA about don't drink or don't drug or whatever. Listen, my dad's a heavy smoker. My mom likes to have her glass of wine and everything, but no, I just don't indulge in that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, I always say, hey, do it in moderation. Don't make it a habit or an addiction, because if you do, it's not going to end well for you later on. But as far as like don't do it at all, I mean, that's a decision you have to make for yourself. I just feel I can live a much healthier and prolonged life if I just don't indulge in that. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that I don't have any health risks. I'm not the healthiest person in the world, but especially with my mental health, you know, I just feel it's just best for myself to not indulge in those kinds of things. Because I'm also conscious of the fact that, you know what, if I had been under that influence during many of these mental episodes that I've had, I can only imagine how much worse it would have been if I had been under the influence of something. So that is one thing that I do sort of pat myself on the shoulder for in terms of my mental health. I've never been drunk or high, and I intend to keep it that way. But as I said before, yes, they were all very emotional. You know, when I was in middle school, I was bullied a lot. I remember in 8th grade, I had kids throwing stuff at me on the bus. A lot of the kids I had to sit with at the lunch table, they thought I was gay. I was reading the Harry Potter books at the time, and people used to call me Harry Pothead. Yeah, not a fun time for me. I mean, high school wasn't always fun either, but if I had to choose between middle school and high school, I will definitely pick high school. Even to the point, let's paint a picture for a second. Let's say you were going to ask me, you have the option, both years of middle school, but I can change it, while I can redo all 4 years of high school, but I can't change it. Now I know what you're saying. It should be the other way around, right? It should be both years of middle school that I can't change, while it's 4 years of high school that I can change. No, I'm sticking with my first option. Here's why. Middle school was such an unpleasant experience for me that by comparison, even if I had to relive all 4 high school years the way they happened, and listen, there is a fuck ton of shit that went on in my high school years that I wish I could change. But even that aspect aside, I would much rather relive the 4 years of high school as is, flaws and all, then relive 2 proportionately better years of middle school. Because that's how much I did not like my years in middle school. Because there was more beyond it than just me being bullied. I wasn't fond of some of the things I was learning there. I wasn't fond of some of the teachers I had there. There was just some things about that school that just made it a very unpleasant experience for me. And yes, I could definitely admit that a lot of my emotional feelings at the time were not helping me in those times as well. So some of it was just beyond the stuff that was around me. A lot of it was internal as well. Yes, I had a crush on the girl in middle school, but I had a large instability within me in terms of how I was handling those feelings. I'm not the best with handling my emotional feelings on those levels. And yes, has it often led to some very sus moments on my part? Yes, and I do apologize for that. And that's a big reason why I've had to embark on this journey of mental health. I mean, listen, I'd be the first to admit that I'm a socially awkward person. I always will be. I have Asperger's syndrome. It does plague certain aspects of my behaviors that I'm not proud of, behaviors that I'm definitely taking more control of these days because it's not the kind of behavior that I want to be associated with. And how have I been in the last few years? I mean, I definitely think in the past 3 years, it's been a minor improvement over the other. I mentioned before how, you know, my teen years were not very happy. My 20 years were not that happy. I mean, they were very mentally challenging times in my life. But just to kind of touch on where I have been recently, 29, I definitely think was much better than 28, even though 29 was a very depressing period for me. 30, I would say was better than 29. 31, I liked better than 30. My 30s have been about average on the whole, if I had to be honest. Do I deal with stress? Of course. When I have too much stress, I have these really bad mental spasms and everything. But as far as like where I was off the spectrum a few years ago, no, nothing nearly like that. But every year changes. So I mean, every year I feel like I gain a little, I lose a little, but you know, I've been on a more or less steady path so far in my 30s, and I'm trying to keep it that way as best as I can. Another large lesson I've had to learn is how to say you're sorry, how to really say you're sorry, because there's different areas of that I had to come to terms with as well. I used to be the kind of person where, like, let's say I had a falling out with somebody, I would say I'm sorry, let some time pass, maybe let a few months go by, maybe even a year go by, and then I would try to reach out to this person and realize that, you know what, no, nothing was healed, at least in terms of where I wanted it to be healed. And I've done that with a few people over the years. I mean, it's been a long time since I've done that. I can't honestly remember the last time I did that, but like the person I am these days would not do that. For instance, 2-3 years ago, I actually took it upon myself to reach out to like specific people from aspects of my life. Most of them were people from like high school, to just say I'm sorry and say like, hey, listen, I know the last time we talked, I was going through a very bad mental period at the time, and I know that is what ended our whatever. And I just want to say I'm sorry, and I do hope wherever you are these days, you're doing good and you're happy and all that. Most of the time, I got no replies from these people. A couple of them even blocked me. It's fine. I'm at the point now where, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have anything else to say. I just said I'm sorry. This isn't something where I'm trying to reopen the friendships or whatever. I'm just here to say I'm sorry and just walk, because that's the biggest lesson I've had to learn in saying you're sorry. Sorry is not about the pursuit of forgiveness. When you say you're sorry, it's not about, hey, can we fix this? It's about, I did something wrong, or I felt I did something wrong. I feel I owe that to you to say I'm sorry. If you don't forgive me, okay, you don't forgive me. I mean, that's your decision to make, not mine. And same with forgiveness. You know, forgiveness does not always offer you a gateway into that person's life again, depending on the situation. It can, but don't expect that to be a guarantee every time. And I've definitely had moments where I've said I'm sorry to somebody, and I would let time pass and I realize that the beef is still there. Why is the beef still there? I said I'm sorry. It's the other person's decision to keep the beef alive. You have to respect that, even if you don't agree with the reasons for why they do it. Unfortunately, that's a shitty aspect of life, but it happens. There is just some very stubborn people in the world. I've been a stubborn person. I mean, listen, when I say I've dealt with stubborn people in my life, that doesn't mean that I don't think that I'm not stubborn. I'm a very stubborn person. I would say a good percentage of my mental health journey is due to my stubbornness and just not wanting to take no for an answer. You can't be that kind of person. It's not going to end well for you. So these days, if I say I'm sorry, I'm apologizing for what I did, and I will leave it at that. If that person wants to reach out to me again after that, that's their decision. And I try to be as clear as I can with my apology. I don't say I'm sorry you felt that way. I try to acknowledge what I did wrong. I mean, one of those people I reached out to a couple years ago from high school to say I was sorry, they were the only person who wrote back to me, and they said, well, I didn't ask you to apologize. Sometimes it's not always about whether you asked me to apologize or not. If I feel I did something wrong, whether you want me to apologize or not, I'm going to apologize. If they don't forgive me or they don't care about the apology, well, whatever. That doesn't mean I take back the apology. I stand by my apologies, but I'm not going to act like if I say I'm sorry, it's just my bullshit way of saying, hey, I just want to be friends again. I say I'm sorry and I leave it at that. But I just want to kind of skip ahead now. I mean, listen, I could talk all day about the mentally straining days of high school, and trust me, those were mentally challenging days. But I think the real mentally challenging moments began in my 20s, at least the moments that have shaped me more into the person that I try to be these days. When I turned 20, I was in college at the time. I just started working. mean, balancing work and school was an adjustment for me at the time. It was around that time that my mom and my then stepdad had separated and eventually divorced, which admittedly kind of caught me off guard at the time, even though I will admit now there was always sort of a part of me that was kind of hoping they might split one day. My former stepdad, he was a weird guy. When I first met him, I wasn't really particularly fond of him. What exactly was I not fond of? I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's not because like another guy's in my mom's life. Listen, she dated a few guys before him, and most of them were guys that I liked. One of them was this dude she knew back from college or high school who was living in Boston, and she wanted to marry him, and we were going to move out there with him, and that's a whole nother story for another time. Although part of that story might actually play into part into something I'm going to talk about later on. But as far as my now ex-stepdad, I don't know. When I first met him, he just seemed like an odd-looking guy. I mean, it's funny, even years later, my dad was saying to me, I think your mom could have done better than him. As the years went on, I started to develop reasons to not be particularly fond of him. He was a little bit stubborn. He was a little bit antagonistic at times. You know, like we would talk about music and I would say I like this or I don't like that, and he would be like, oh, well, I think that's awesome. And he had some condescending moments. Like, it actually got kind of bad the last few months before they eventually decided to split. For instance, the last Christmas we had with him, around that time, my mom had asked him to go get a Christmas tree. But when she got home, she saw him laying on the couch watching TV, and she didn't see the tree, so she asked him, she's like, did you get a tree? And he looked at her and said, do you see a tree? And another moment that I really feel he crossed the line with me personally was around that time my semester had ended. I was still in college and I gotten a couple C's. But instead of being like, well, please try to study harder next time. I know you're better than that. You can do this. You're a good student. You know, you can be nice about it. I told him I was sorry, and he looks at me and he goes, well, you should be. You don't do your laundry. You don't have a job. You don't do this or that. And the least you could do is get good grades. Like, being so fucking condescending. And I literally just got up and walked away because I thought, if I sit here, I'm just gonna cuss this guy out. I don't care if he's my stepdad. Yeah, he was not the greatest guy to always live with. I think partly what got me through the years that we did live with him was the house that we lived in with him. I pretty much had the whole upstairs to myself. He and my mom had the downstairs bedroom, so I was kind of in my own little world in the upstairs realm, so I didn't really have to deal with him that much. But the day that they actually decided they were gonna split, that caught me off guard, and I remember that day because he picks me up from college to drop me off at my dad's. Usually most of the car rides I have with him are pretty quiet. I just don't really feel the need to really say much to him. But on this particular day, I kind of decided to put my guard down a little bit. So like we talked about music and just talked about other things. And you know, funny enough, it's one of the few decent, nice car rides I actually had with him. Another reason that car ride sticks out with me is because I remember at one point I had forgotten something at home. Now, most of the time when I'm driving around with him and I forget something, he's like, oh well. We were about halfway to my dad's and he was actually nice enough to turn the car around, to drive me all the way back for me to grab whatever it was, and then drop me off at my dad's. That is the only time he ever did that for me. So you can sort of imagine the surprise that fell upon me a couple hours later when my mother calls me like in tears saying that he and her are going to be separating. And you know, it's sort of a mixed emotion because on one hand there's this part of me that was kind of hoping this day would come, but at the same time it's like my mother's crying. This is the man she married. The whole reason I was putting up with him for the better part of a decade at this point was because my mother loved him. I decided at 11 years old, I'm gonna put up with this man because if he's making my mother happy, who am I to come between that? That may have been the first like adult decision I ever made in my life. The fact that I'm not gonna come between two people who love each other. If she loves him, then it's not really my place to say anything. Now, years later after they had separated, I had become more open about this with my mom. She's like, well, why didn't you tell me, Christopher? And I'm like, well, because if you loved him, I wasn't gonna say anything. That's still my stance on those kinds of subjects, even now in my 30s. If that was the case with the guy that my mom's married to right now, if you love him, I'm not gonna say anything. It's not about what I think about him. Fortunately, the guy she's married to right now, I don't like feel that way. I love my current stepdad. But no, 20 was a bit of a mentally challenging time because again, work, school, separation. Then we skipped to 2014 where I turned 21. That was a very mentally challenging time for me, particularly in the fall because that was around the time that one of my dogs had passed away. I was now entering my final year of college. I was still working, and that semester was very stressful. I remember I was doing this journalism class, and that was the kind of course where I would go to bed at night just all paranoid about how I was going to do in this class. And then my dad got into some serious trouble, which I don't want to go in full detail about, but like he got into some serious trouble that he's still kind of suffering the repercussions of, and it's situations that, if I'm going to be frank, has fractured a great deal of my trust in him in the past decade. But it was the kind of trouble where he at one point moved to Colorado out where my uncle was living because they were going to help him get work because he was unemployed at the time, and that didn't last long. He came back literally a month later, which was in January of 2015, because he just didn't know the area. He wasn't getting along with my uncle's girlfriend at the time, and he just felt better that if he was over here, he would have a better chance of getting work because at least he knew the area. But as far as like me and my mental health. I mean, like I said, that one semester was very stressful. Also work, it was the fall. I mean, now we're approaching the holidays, and that's always a stressful time. At the same time, I had fallen out with one of my high school friends who was a friend who at the time I had some lingering feelings for. And with all the stress that was going on with me at the time, I do admit that I become a very clingy, obsessive friend at the time, and it permanently ended our friendship. I take full responsibility for that. Those last couple months of 2014 into the beginnings of 2015, not a good time for me. Very mentally challenging, very depressing, very just not knowing what to do with myself. Have I ever physically harmed myself during the process of these mental episodes? No. I've just been sort of playing through the pain as best as I could, but it was not a fun time. And then 22 and 23, I mean, better than 21, but they weren't the best times of my life either. Then around 24, the saddest part of 24 was when my dog Jack had to be put to sleep. Keep in mind, he was hit by a car when he was less than a year old, so he had back problems for pretty much the bulk of his life. And yeah, that last year with him just wasn't the best. He was really struggling. I didn't actually go with my mom and my stepdad to put him to sleep. I just didn't want to deal with that emotion at the time, which I kind of regret now. There's still that part of me that thinks it was my dog. I should have been there. And now I feel like, okay, I have my dog Lulu. What's going to happen the time that she has to go? If I went for her, what does that say about the time I didn't go for Jack? You know, these are the kinds of thoughts that go through my head from time to time. But 24 was sort of the start of the period that would eventually lead to the life-changing mental health moment that has permanently been etched in my mind to the point that I cannot stop thinking about it every day. And it's the moment that has given me the perspective and the self-reevaluation that I've had to take upon myself to become a better person. So when I was 23, I actually at one point deactivated my Facebook just because, I don't know, I just became a little disinterested in it and I just kind of wanted some time away for it. And that was a break that lasted 2 years. But during that 2-year break, at one point I joined Twitter for the first time. Now, Twitter was a site that for the longest time I had been kind of resisting, but I joined Twitter back around mid-2017. And pretty much the bulk of my years on Twitter, I was engaged in an online community based around a YouTube channel that I was watching at the time. This wasn't like planned or anything, it's just this is what I was into at the time that I was joining Twitter, so naturally, okay, yeah, I'm gonna follow those channels and follow some people from that. Obviously, this could change over time. I'll find other communities to be a part of or whatever. But no, the bulk of those 4 years was basically me interacting with that one specific community. Not that there was anything wrong with that. I actually got to interact with some really nice, cool, very creative people who were doing like fan art and cosplays and stuff. These were kind of the communities that I didn't really engage in much, but developed a much bigger and deeper respect for. And it was nice. And there was this one person who was also a YouTuber who I was engaging with a lot on Twitter. And after about a year, this person actually followed me back and we became really nice, good online friends for a while. Around that same time, I actually took a trip to Connecticut to a convention where some of these people were going to be at because I wanted to meet some of these people in person because I only know these people through Twitter. Because this isn't like people I know from high school or work who I see on like a semi-regular basis. But the fact that some of these people from my Twitter crowd were going to be at this convention, I thought, let me go there because Connecticut was the closest convention I could get to that I knew that some of them would be at. And I planned out that trip for a good few months. I tried to get some friends to go with me and they were all working and everything. Eventually I narrowed it down to my dad. We could come up Thursday and leave Friday afternoon, which I got him to agree to extend to Saturday morning because he had work on Saturday, but it was in the afternoon. I just figured, you know what? If I'm going to be here for one good day, let me make the most of that one day. And funny enough, that's really to date the only major road trip I've ever done with my dad. All the traveling I've done over the years have been like on my mom's side of the family. Like I've been to Texas, Colorado, Pennsylvania, been to California once, went to Massachusetts a few times, but never with my dad. The most out of state I've ever been with him was going to Philly for some concerts. So this was sort of a first time trip for both of us because he had never been that far north before. But even when we went to the convention, you know, like that was new for my dad. He had never been to any of these kinds of cons before. Like he had dragged me out to some sports conventions a couple times throughout the years. But as far as like seeing cosplays and stuff, that was new for him and like that really opened his eyes. And then I got to meet some of my Twitter friends and it was so nice. I got some hugs from some of them. I gave a lot of them fan art. But the one person who I was definitely the most excited to see at the time was the person who, again, was a YouTuber at the time. And she gave me like 5-6 hugs when I met her. I didn't even ask for those hugs. She just came over and just gave me some hugs. It was so nice. It was one of the best trips of my life. I mean, despite the events that would take place later on, I had no regrets about that trip because I personally financed that trip myself. I had a great time. I said I would totally do this again. I mean, obviously not now, given the state of circumstances that happened later on. I have like almost no regrets about the first 2 years that I was in those communities. The first 2 years were fun. I was interacting with some really cool, creative people. It was so fun, so lovely. I was getting some really nice recognition from some of these people in the communities. It really caught me off guard at the time, but I don't take any of it for granted looking back at it now. I mean, listen, I can't speak for everybody else. Maybe they've had to retroactively change their opinions of my role in those communities based on what happened later on, at which point, if any of them are watching this, I'm sorry from the bottom bottom of my heart. No, I'm not saying I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm saying I'm sorry that I put you in the position to have to feel that way. But for me personally, I have practically no regrets about the first 2 years. I got to be very creative in that time because I was making all this fan art. I've never really done that before, at least not to really share with a bunch of people online. I started doing some more YouTube stuff, not a lot, not to the extent that I'm doing now, but I was doing a little bit more with my YouTube channel. I got my creative flows going at the time. And the fact that this one person who was like my favorite YouTuber at the time gave me a birthday shout out on my birthday back in 2019, bought me stuff on my Amazon wish list to congratulate me on a job promotion I had at the time. A list of things that they did not have to do for me, that they were kind enough to do for me. And I look back at it even now and I think to myself, what was I really doing? Was that a fantasy or was that all real? I mean, it just felt so surreal at the time. I appreciate it. I'm not taking anything away from it, even if the parties involved want to take it all away at this point. The only real regrets I have about the first 2 years were situations that personally were beyond my control. Around that time, there was a lot of bullshit drama going on within the communities. I even got caught in the crossfire of some of this bullshit at the time, but nothing that I started, nothing that I was involved with. That's really the only thing I look back with some regret in the first 2 years. But everything else, as far as like what I was doing within that community at the time, I had a blast. I would love to relive those first 2 years. Those are memories that I'm always going to cherish. But just to get into the somewhat darker areas of this period of my life. So in November of 2018, I got hired as a cart pusher over at Sam's Club. I was already a cart pusher at the job that I was at up to that point, but at this point I thought, well, it's more money, it's better hours, I'll have a schedule 2-3 weeks in advance, which I didn't have at my other job, and I was there for 6 months. And the first 3 months were actually not that bad. I thought to myself, I could definitely tough it out here for a little while. But within the last 2-3 months, things just gradually started changing a great deal, and it just got to the point where I was literally waking up every day thinking to myself, oh my God, what's going to happen today? I'm of the mindset that regardless of what your job is, regardless of what the pay is, if you're waking up every day and you're afraid of what's going to happen at work that day, that's how much the job is stressing you out. It's time to jump ship. And that's what was happening to me those last like 2-3 months that I worked at Sam's Club. Because the management was just keeping this closer eye on us, that it just felt like they were just sort of plotting something, like a way to get rid of some of us somehow. And for me, the turning point happened at the beginning of May. It was a Sunday, it was a rainy day. The dude I was working with that day, it was actually his last day, and I think the only reason he showed up is because he knew he was working with me. But it was a really busy day. We were pulling a line of carts up, and one of our managers was pulling a line of carts from the side of the building. And as we're bringing this line up, she looks at us and she says, "We've been calling you on the walkie. People are complaining that there's no carts in here. I don't understand how there's 2 of you and you let it get this low." Now that last part has stuck with me for the past 6 years. You let it get this low. The moment she said that, that was sort of the planting of the seed that I thought it's not worth to stay here. So on my way home that day, I actually went to my old job just to see if my manager was there and possibly talk to them about getting my job back. I went there, I didn't see them, and at the same time I'm thinking to myself, am I doing this more as a reflex or a rebound just because I had a really bad day? I thought, just go home, get out of your wet soaked clothes, have some dinner, just relax, hopefully tomorrow will be better. Just to be safe, I did go on my computer that night and applied back to my old job. But then something happened the next morning that fully convinced me, no, I have to go back to my old job. So the guy I was working with the next morning, I was telling him the whole story of what happened the day before, and I didn't even finish the story. He cut me off at one point. He said, "Oh yeah, I was talking to her this morning. She said you guys were standing against the wall the whole day and nothing got done." I thought, she said what? We didn't stand against the wall that entire day. We never had time to. So I thought, she's purposely making up lies about me now. And that was the point where I just thought, nope, this is not worth it anymore. So after my shift that day, I actually went back to my old job. I actually asked for my manager this time. She took me upstairs. I told her this situation. Long story short, I got my job back within like 3 minutes, which some people thought was crazy of me at the time. They thought, well, here you're going to get paid less. You're not going to have a schedule 2 weeks in advance. What these people don't understand was this was a major decision I had to make in regards to my mental health. Yes, we all have to work, but when your job is pulling you to the point where you're either afraid you're going to have the worst mental breakdown of your life and just walk, or they're just going to come up with some bullshit reason to get rid of you, it's time to leave. I was fully convinced that regardless of what I did, even if I tried to stay, I was not going to be there much longer. But to be fair, when I went back to my old job, I actually asked them, I'll stick with carts for a little bit, but can I maybe get moved to something else at some point? Which eventually led to them training me on register, which I did for a little bit, but then a customer complained about something that was sort of a pure accident on my part, but nonetheless, they got pushed me back on carts. But at some point, I was moved back inside to the department that I'm basically have been in now for the last 6 years. But no, that 2019 to 2021 period was definitely a mentally challenging time for me as far as work was concerned. It was also a mentally challenging time for me as far as like what was going on in the world. Like in 2020, we had the elections. I mentioned earlier that, you know, I got a little bit involved in the discussions on that just because I felt I had to at the time, but I quickly learned, no, I didn't have to. The pandemic was going on and the effects of that were definitely contributing to my mental health. I mean, truth be told, I am the kind of guy who likes to stay home and do nothing, but I think that sense of isolation and the lockdown was definitely contributing very heavily to my mental health and my stress levels, especially with work because, you know, everybody was in this panic. They're rushing to the store. They're trying to stock up so they can get through this whole lockdown and everything. And I think just being in the midst of that was definitely not good for my stress and not good for my mental health during that period. But to kind of get back to my Twitter community for a second, things around this time were definitely changing drastically, and it was all coming down to my mental health. More specifically, it was getting really bad between me and my YouTuber friend on Twitter, because it was getting to the point now where I was really starting to open doors for myself. As I mentioned before, I was really kind of caught off guard with how people were being responsive to me on social media at that time, that after a while I just started to take a lot of it for granted, even to the point that I was actually starting to become quite competitive with some of the people in the communities. Not that they necessarily knew that, but I definitely was becoming competitive. And it was just getting to the point where I just felt every good thing that I was contributing, I was deserving of something in return, which is a very horrible and narcissistic way to approach things. Listen, it's awesome when we contribute something and we're rewarded for it or acknowledged for it, but that doesn't happen every time. And in some cases, you just have to sort of say, you contributed and that should be enough. And that really should have been my mindset at the time, and unfortunately it wasn't. And that was even more so the case with my YouTuber friend. I remember one time I messaged them on Instagram saying something like, it pisses me off that you follow me everywhere else, but you don't follow me here. Again, a really shitty thing like that honestly would not even bother me now. Listen, there's people I talk to online these days who don't follow me or friend me anywhere, but they still respond to me, and that's enough for me now. But just like little things like that, and it just got to the point where just nothing was making me happy. Just the tiniest little thing was just offsetting me at the time. And it was also just driving a further wedge between me and my YouTuber friend, to the point that they had to set boundaries. It's not that they didn't want me around anymore, it's not that they didn't want me to contribute anymore, but they didn't want me, you know, private messaging them anymore, which, given my mental health at the time, I was constantly trying to bend the rules a little bit, because I've now come far enough in my healing at this point to admit that yes, I did have some lingering feelings for this person, which I think is partly what was contributing heavily to my situation with them, because I knew these were feelings that were never going to pay off later on. But nonetheless, I was trying to bend the rules a little bit with these boundaries, which was wrong. I would not do that now. The only boundaries you might see me break these days is I might reach out to somebody to just say, I'm sorry, not for how you feel, no, for what I did. And at that point, I just walk and I just leave it at that. And then 2021 was not a good time. I was between jobs at the time. I quit my job twice that year, believe it or not. First time was when I got a delivery driver position at Domino's, which I did for one day, and I just decided, nah, I don't want to do this. So I actually withdrew that resignation. Second time is when I got hired at Home Depot for about a month. Not that it was necessarily a bad job, but you get the vibes, and I just thought to myself, at its best, it's a boring job. At its worst, it sucks, and I just feel like there's really nobody in my corner here to help make this better for me. So I did it for a month, and I went back to my old job. In April of that year, one of my dogs died, and I did a Twitter post about it, which got like no response. And I don't think it's just because nobody responded to it. I think it just sort of fell through the cracks, but I nonetheless took it personally at the time, and I just did this whole post saying like, this is why I don't like posting on Twitter. It pisses me off that I post these things, nobody reacts and everything. And again, not the kind of post I would make these days, and I'm really kind of ashamed of myself for doing that. Nonetheless, in the heat of all that, I unfollowed my one YouTuber friend, and in retaliation, they unfollowed me back. And deservingly so. I deserved that at the time. But to make matters worse, I practically was like messaging them over the next few days, begging them to follow me back again. And dude, you don't do that. You unfollowed them first. Don't put them in the position to have to follow you back. Again, definitely not something I would do now. But I continued in that community for another few months. It was a struggle. I mean, I definitely felt like I had been downgraded, but at the same time, that's all on me. You're not keeping your mental health in check, dude, and this is why this is causing a bigger divide in terms of where you were in this community. I mean, just 2 years before that, my YouTuber friend had personally recommended me to be a moderator on a Twitch channel, which I accepted at the time just because I just thought, well, they're actually offering something to me. I don't know what this is or whatever, but I'll take it. In retrospect, I shouldn't have taken it just because it's just not something I'm cut out for. There are definitely way better qualified people for that. I mean, I'm always going to be grateful they at least threw my name out there, but when you're talking about this period in 2021, they wouldn't have recommended me for that now. Finally, around October of 2021, I messaged the person on a Discord, and again, they had to reiterate the boundaries, and that led to a big fight between her and I, where I was saying, well, I've only been breaking these boundaries like within reason and everything, which I mean, I look back now and that's not true. And they rightfully retaliated by saying, listen, I've gone through all these messages and they all tell a different story. So that really was the end of it. And again, that's not what I would do now. But unfortunately, because of the state of my mental health at that time, and because of the circumstances related to those situations, it led to what is arguably the worst mental breakdown of my life. And not only was it a bad mental breakdown, it's the moment that has now forced perspective on myself in terms of where I was with my mental health, where I was in terms of how I was treating people, where I was on my stance on boundaries. Like, I have a much better respect for boundaries these days. So I'm now going to skip over to April of 2022. April 3rd, 2022 to be exact. The reason I remember that is because it's 2 days before my birthday. I uploaded a YouTube video that I shot in March. It was an unlisted video, but I still ended up linking it on my Twitter, so nonetheless, I'm still feel posting it in a public place. It was a video called Breaking My Silence, and it was a 1-hour video basically summing up my whole time in that community from like the middle of 2017 up to that point, going on full detail about what I was doing in that community, and more specifically my interactions with my ex-YouTuber friend. That basically was the first half of the video, but the last like 20 minutes of the video, I just skewed off on a terrible mental tangent. I just let out all this rage towards my ex-friend, screaming and yelling about how I didn't think this was fair. I said they accused me of crossing lines when they've lied to me for 2 years. Because of you, I can't go on Twitter anymore. Stupid bullshit like that. Not the stance I would take these days, and it's the day that is never gonna leave me. That is an image that's always gonna be burned into my mind, whether I like it or not, but the only good thing about it is it gave me the needed perspective that I needed to earn at the time to put me on a better path. But nonetheless, my Twitter crowd saw that video. How did they respond? They all mass blocked me. I have a list of regrets in my life, but if I had to pick the one regret in my entire life, doing that video is definitely high, if not at the top of that list. And I remember I was scared for the first few days because I just thought, oh my god, what's gonna happen now? What's gonna happen now? But for the most part, nothing's happened since then. Some might even say I got off easy. That doesn't make me feel better about it, but nonetheless, and I just thought, what do I do now? I don't want that to be the final message I leave with these people. I thought I have to apologize. I have to address this. But I thought I can't do it right away.